Hello and welcome to another Standard Games video on the official MTG Arena YouTube. Today I'm channeling my inner CGB and playing Blue-White Control, a deck known for its sweepers, counterspells and card draw, and then at some point we can close out the game with some of our random tokens, like the Samurai from the Wandering Emperor. We've got the Incubator tokens from Sunfall, or we can perhaps poison the opponent to death with our Mites from White Sun's Twilight, or even the Mirex in our mana base can make more of those. But as any good control deck, we're not too worried about closing out the game. We're much more worried about hitting our land drops and making sure we can survive until the late game, where our deck can usually take over. So let's take a look at the rest of our deck here, starting with Elspeth's Smite at 1 mana, a new 1 mana instant that can deal 3 damage to an attacking or blocking creature, exiling it in the process if it would die, which can come up if you're facing mono-red aggro with Phoenix Chick. There's Cameo of Transience out of the green-white enchantment deck, and even Tenacious Underdog can also come back from the graveyard with Blitz, so exiling all those early threats can be quite relevant. Then at 2 mana we've got Syncopate, which we can cast for X equals 1, but can also scale nicely into the late game as a counterspell that counters anything unless the opponent pays X, also exiling it in the process. And then there's Negate to counter non-creature spells, and Sunset Revelry can also be nice against the more aggressive decks in the format like mono-red aggro, potentially making 2 1/1s gaining 4, and occasionally drawing a card as well if we have fewer cards than the opponent. And then at 3 mana, I'm also main decking 2 copies of Knockout Blow as another great card against mono-red aggro, costing 2 less to cast if it targets a red creature, so then it's just a single white to deal 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature and gaining 2 life in the process. So this shines definitely against the red aggro deck, but even against other strategies can still take out an Adeline at 4 toughness for instance. And then Union of the Third Path will replace itself by drawing a card, and then we gain life equal to the number of cards in our hand, so this will also shine against the red burn decks, as we can often gain 5 or 6 life with this in the early game, which buys us a whole nother turn, maybe lets the opponent overextend into our various board wipes, and then we can eventually take over. And then I'm playing Airtice Scorn as my 3 mana counterspell of choice, and there's a few options here. You could play Dissipate to exile the spell you counter. There's Urza's Rebuff, which also has the flexibility of maybe tapping 2 creatures down, but I think the discount on Airtice Scorn is still worth it, costing a blue less to cast if an opponent casts 2 or more spells this turn, so that 1 mana discount can make a pretty big difference. And then at 4 mana, we're playing the full set of Memory Deluge as our main card draw engine. We get to take a look at the top X cards of our library, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast it, and then put 2 of those cards in our hand and the rest on the bottom. And then we can flash it back for 7 mana, at which point, of course, we get to take a look at the top 7 cards, so can dig pretty deep to find specific answers. And then if we're ever taxed by a Thalia, we can maybe dig 1 card deeper as well. And then the Wandering Emperor is another great one, can be flashed in, exiling a tapped creature, gaining some life, and eventually take over by making Samurai tokens, maybe after casting a sweeper effect, and then we can put more +1 counters on it as well. And then our sweepers include Sunfall, which will exile all creatures, and then Incubate X, where X is the number of creatures exiled this way, so we'll get a whole bunch of +1 counters on that Incubator token, and then we can pay 2 mana to turn it into a creature to start attacking and blocking. Then there's Farewell, which can exile all artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and or graveyards, so especially effective against various enchantment strategies, and we can also keep our planeswalkers alive. Can also be a weakness of Farewell when facing opposing planeswalkers, but there's not too many that are seeing a ton of play in Standard. And then there's White Sun's Twilight, which can gain X life, create X 1/1 Might tokens that cannot block and have Toxic 1, and then if X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. So this can stabilize us by destroying all opposing creatures, gaining a bunch of life, and then the Might tokens also turn into a very viable win condition, especially when backed up by the Mirex, which can make more 1/1 Mites with Toxic 1. And then we've got some more blue-white dual lands to help fix for double blue and double white early, and then a Soaring City and Eiganjo offer more interaction. Not playing the fast land, since I don't want my lands coming to play tapped later in the game, since we might need that land to cast our sweeper, which can make all the difference. So overall, this deck should be pretty well positioned when facing red aggro decks with all the cheap interaction and life gain, but at the same time we have our counterspells to deal with the 5-color domain deck, countering an Atraxa before it can come down to make sure the opponent doesn't draw a million cards. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump in some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, and our hand seems fine. Good mix of tools between aggro and more mid-range strategies. And even against control we have a Scorn and an Emperor. So Opponent on red-black could be more mid-rangey deck. Turn to Executioner, so it looks like a sacrifice strategy. Okay. We've got Farewell, which can also deal with artifacts, like an Oni Cold Anvil. For now, happy to smite Vran if it attacks. Opponent could potentially sacrifice it in response, but that's okay. Mirrex is actually a concern, since it can give the opponent some late-game inevitability. And now a Requisitioner. Also would have been nice to exile with Elspeth's Smite, but can do so with Wandering Emperor as well. So we'll let them untap. The only concern with playing Emperor now is if our opponent taps out for, let's say, a Shieldred. That's going to do quite a bit of damage. So I think I'll take the 3 damage. And then if they don't play anything worth countering, I'll just play Emperor end of turn to exile Requisitioner. It's going to be Harvester, that's acceptable. So I think the plan's still Emperor, exile Requisitioner. Could also just make a Samurai here, but that's somewhat likely to die.
I'm not overconfident. You're just underwhelming.
And then we can play Revelry to protect our Emperor. Alright, opponent's going to cut down their own Requisitioner to deny the life gain and to make a treasure token. But now if they don't have a cut down to answer my tokens. So play Revelry. And put a counter on one of them. And now I'm kind of hoping our opponent empties their hands and runs into Farewell while we can keep our Planeswalker around. But as I've said, the Mirrex is still going to be a concern. Not a card you often see in mid-range decks. More of a thing for control and maybe ramp strategies, or the occasional poison deck. It's going to be another Vran. Okay, that happens. So now they sacrifice Harvester, they get to trigger Vran. With Farewell we can also deal with all the artifact tokens. Okay, Obnixilis, that one does make another copy, but I still want to Airtight score on one of them. And then they get to keep the one with 3 loyalty. I guess they both have 3 loyalty, so maybe would have been better off countering the copy as opposed to the real one, since they can now play another copy potentially. Okay, so Emperor can plus, and then send both tokens at Obnixilis, hoping we can take it out.
Strike fast and strike hard.
Opponent's going to protect it. One damage to the Emperor. And then I'm not going to Farewell here. Just pass it back. Hope to pressure Obnixilis with our tokens from Emperor. Just take the 2 damage for now.
Your punishment is my entertainment.
Harvester. That happens. Alright, so I think we just keep putting counters on our token and hope they don't have spot removal. If they do, I'll have to pull the trigger on Farewell most likely. Opponent goes digging. They had You Are Already Dead in hand. Could have been good with the devil tokens.
Remember your training.
So if our opponent just lets Obnixilis die, they could take out Emperor with Harvester, so I may still Farewell just to keep it around. But our opponent chum blocks. And they cashed in their last blood token, discarding a land. Alright, so it's still anyone's game. We're waiting for a big card draw effect to pull us ahead. And I'll hang on to my lands since we may need them. So now I'm just going to send 3/3 out of Obnixilis. Union's nice. And then likely just make another Samurai. Opponent can start pressuring Emperor with the Mirrex tokens, but a Samurai of course can just block them. And then I'll Union before playing my land to gain 1 more life. And there's Deluge, perfect. Exactly what we needed here to pull ahead. So our opponent makes a token. And at this point it's just about finding more counterspells and maybe another finisher. Okay, cut down our token. If that happens, can still maybe deluge into an Elspeth's Smite, but if Emperor takes 1 damage, that's okay. So let's go digging. No smites, but a Syncopate and a Sunfall. Yeah, those seem fine. So next turn we can keep up Syncopate and Deluge.
This isn't going to go how you think.
Ooh, another Obnixilis. Okay, not what we wanted to see. Our hand doesn't really answer it.
Conquered entire plains. One sitting down the locals.
Take 2 more damage. Another Union's nice.
Pleasure doing
Okay, so cast a Union here maybe. Or we could just Deluge to dig for more answers. But I might want to keep up Syncopate as well. If I Union, could maybe still hit a land drop, and then Syncopate for 4, likely to be enough. Another Syncopate.
Show them how we greet our enemies.
Opponent's probably chumping here. 1 damage to the Emperor. But I think we're starting to pull ahead, even though our opponent's got double Obnixilis in play. Unlucky Witness. That one they can actually resolve through Syncopate here. So that was one of their better plays, strangely enough.
Defy me, and you'll lose everything.
Down to 14 we go.
Your punishment is my end.
So could main phase Deluge, that seems risky, tapping out of Syncopate. So probably just plus on the token, keep attacking. Opponent can make token end of turn and kill Emperor with both 1/1s if they want to, but they're likely chumping with the Witness.
Remember your training.
And then a Flashback Deluge should dig us pretty deep for more answers. Opponent did find another Obnixilis, but they don't have a creature to sack unless they want to sack the 1/1, I guess. So yeah, opponent finding triple Obnixilis in this matchup gave them a chance. Epicure also slightly annoying. If I want to counter that, I would need to pay X equals 5 on the Syncopate. Let's just let that happen, and then I might just Deluge instead.
My goons will make quick work of you. By
Fall to 11.
or carnage, tribute is owed.
Emperor falls to 1. That's fine.
Always glad to meet my match.
And there's another Obnixilis. Without casualty, so they can only keep 1 around. And our opponent's gonna plus. Okay, let's Deluge Flashback in response. Finding Negate, farewell, White Sun's Twilight. Probably what we want here, alongside maybe another Deluge. And then now I might just ditch a Syncopate.
Plead for mercy.
And then I probably want to just White Suns and try to kill the opponent with poison damage. So I think we just White Suns for X equals 7. So here I can decide between using Emperor first, so it doesn't die to the devil, or potentially using it afterwards, and then they do go for Emperor, but now we get to keep 7 tokens around, so that should be a pretty fast clock.
You work for me now, runt.
Obnixilis pluses.
Or carnage
At 18 life, I'll just take 2.
is owed.
And Only Cold Anvil can make a 1/1. Farewell, exiling artifacts is probably not something we want to do when our mites are artifacts. Another Emperor will help. Alternative is to finish off double Obnixilis with our mites, which is also a reasonable strategy here. Could also Elspeth's Smite, and that would exile the creature, so that way we don't trigger the devil. And then I'll just Emperor now to put a counter on the other mites. So 5 poison goes through. And yeah, still have Syncopate and Deluge available. On the off chance our opponent plays a sweeper next turn, we can counter it. And even if they make 2 more devils, we should still get there with the poison. They can make their own might. Okay, Ashnod doesn't change anything. Opponent can make another 1/1 with Anvil. 2 more devils. They can make a handful more blockers. Right, Ashnod activates for 5 mana. Makes a tapped token. So yeah, best they can do is send the might at Emperor, sack it to the Anvil, make another 1/1, and then make 2 devils.
My revenge will be cruel. Shake down the locals.
Nope, bonus plussing. So now they only have 3 blockers at most to our 7 attackers. So technically still keeps him alive. Let's see if we can find something useful. High Ganjo can kill a blocker. Maybe grab another Union. So let's Union first. Any point in using Emperor here to plus? Probably just make a Samurai at this point, but I can attack first. I'll let our opponents. Okay, so let's Ganjo, and then I can save my 2/2 might. Opponent takes 4 more poison up to 9 total. Devil triggers. And let's just make a Samurai and pass with Syncopate X equals 3. And then we should finally cross the finish line next turn. Opponent drew another Mirex. Obnixilis makes a devil. Anvil can make another blocker. But that should be game. So yeah, it took us a while to actually close out the game, but we weren't ever in any real danger, I would say. Despite our opponent finding triple Obnixilis, which is one card that does get around our sweepers. And we get to see the new poison animation here. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a fine hand. Good mix of interaction. Of course, we do need a second blue source to cast Artai's Scorn. Opponent on red aggro, so could already knock out blow here. And that's reasonable. Could also just Revelry next turn and then blow on maybe a larger creature. So I'll take it for now. And then, yeah, we'll just Revelry, which will draw cards, make 2 1/1s and gain 4. Pretty good deal. Found our extra blue source here. And yeah, this is kind of like a pre-sideboarded card for the matchup. Now, Mishra's Foundry is certainly a concern. Felden, I probably just want to double block, since if I cast a knockout blow, they get to dig pretty deep for another card. Whereas now they only get to dig 2 cards deep. And they found Play with Fire and Kami's Flare. So they'll probably grab the Play with Fire. Just gonna hang on to Airtice, Scorn and Knockout Blow. Scorn getting a discount's also not impossible in this matchup. Felden, we probably just counter. And then next turn I can Deluge. And then we'll have a cheap removal spell that also gains life available. Opponent missing their third land drop is also a big deal. So they weren't able to use the Play with Fire. Does mean that their hand is all action, so we do need to prepare for a long game. But we're definitely prepared to play a long game with White Sun's Twilight. And our opponent already throws in the towel here. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, and our hand is not perfect. Pretty top heavy with Sunfall and Farewell. So I think this is a mulligan. Okay, this one I'll try to keep. Get rid of the White Suns and then Scorn into Deluge to maybe find another sweeper. Turn 1 officers, so could be mono-white aggro or maybe blue-white soldiers. Hope to dodge a turn 2 Thalia. It's going to be an invasion of Gobakan, also pretty effective here. Likely to make Emperor more expensive, but they could also go for Scorn since it's our only 3 mana play. Alright, Scorn costs 5 mana now. Luckily most of our sweepers will just exile the opponent's team, so the invasion won't be able to protect them. But could still be quite relevant, of course. Now Thalia shows up. Yeah, that's a pretty amazing start for a mono-white deck against blue-white control. Opponent has to pay the Thalia tax for their own enchantment. That's pretty funny. Okay, Union I can cast. Probably need Soaring City as my 5th land drop as opposed to bouncing Thalia with it, but it is an option. Now Adeline shows up, dodges the -2 from Wandering Emperor. So also lines up quite well here. So we're not catching any breaks. Let's just Union, gain some life back. And then hope to pick up a Sunfall soon. That's probably our best hope. Another Scorn. Let's pass it back. So we can Deluge, go digging, and try to find Sunfall. Officer's fine. So I guess our opponent does actually present lethal here. 10, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, that's exactly lethal. So what's the solution? Emperor make a token to chump Adeline. Because if I try to target their creatures, they can give hexproof and indestructible, so that's not going to work. Don't even gain the 2 life of the Wandering Emperor's -2. And Soaring City is also not going to help. So this is my only play. And then I will need to top deck a Sunfall naturally.
Keep watch for intruders.
And that's no Sunfall. Can see if we would have found it with Deluge. I'm kind of curious. No Sunfall, but an Elspeth's Smite and another Emperor. Alright, so we never really had a chance this game. GG's. And reinforcements end of turn also could have been a nice follow-up to a sweeper. Yeah, the 1-2 punch of early pressure, then Thalia ends their invasion for disruption is quite effective, and another invasion to rub it in here. Yeah, this matchup seems pretty rough for blue-white control. But on the flip side, we have better tools against the red burn deck between the cheap removal and the life gain. So we give up kind of our equity in the white matchup to make sure we have a better matchup against mono red, which remains a more popular aggro deck in the format. Opponent making sure to finish off everything, including us. GG's. On to the next one.
Our swords will cross again.
Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Don't have any super cheap interaction, but hopefully Union into double Emperor can keep us alive. I'll just play a tapped Beach. Don't want to play Aganjo quite yet. Companion. And Green-White Enchantments is one of our better matchups, since it's just a creature deck that doesn't have any burn spells to close out the game. They don't have any meaningful disruption like Thalia, which can be quite effective against a control strategy, so they're just going to run their creatures straight into our sweepers, and especially Farewell, exiling all enchantments, is going to be quite backbreaking. Also have plenty of ways to exile their Cameo of Transience, which is one of the recursive threats that can hope to come back from the graveyard, but now between Elspeth's Smite and all the sweepers that exile, even that doesn't usually work. And sure, we'll play another Darkar Waste, hang on to Aganjo. Or I could just play it to save myself the damage to play Emperor. Don't think I'm channeling Aganjo when I have double Emperor and Farewell in hand. Opponent still draws off Audacity even if we exile the companion. Hallowed Haunting, that is definitely a problem if it weren't for Farewell, since it dodges other sweepers and can give them some nice staying power. So now just Emperor, ambush the companion, and then next turn I can minus on the other one, still have an Emperor in hand, that's an option. Yeah, I don't hate that. Could also just minus on the original companion, but may as well ambush the other one.
The energy of battle, energized like keep watch for intruders.
And then I could make another Samurai, or I could just exile their current companion. Let's go ahead and just cash this in.
Until next time, gang.
Attack for 2.
This is what you get for hurting my people.
And then I have the option of activating Mirex. Want to wait for them to commit more to the board before casting Farewell. Visitor into Weaver. And another Weaver. Alright, that's probably enough already. Opponent does still have 3 cards in hand, but their board is quite threatening at the moment. So let's just Union. And a White Suns gives us another sweeper, so don't feel bad casting a Farewell here. Can attack with a token first, but yeah, there's no way our opponent doesn't see what's incoming here. Could actually Emperor put a +1 counter on it, but everything is gone. And our opponent has to rebuild just to run into another board wipe. Calyx, a good combo with Audacity to maybe immediately copy another enchantment. So I could just White Suns for 5 here, and that will present a pretty fast clock to kill the opponents. As opposed to Wandering Emperor, try and exile Calyx. And then Mirex can complement our current Might tokens. Catilda. Just a 1/1. And Announcement. Okay. So I can still attack into it. Now Elspeth's Smite also an option. Or we can just put a +1 counter on the Might with Wandering Emperor. So if I Smite, we exile Catilda so they cannot bring it back. Might be the more elegant solution. Sure. And then I can hang on to Syncopate or activate Mirex. Another Catilda, okay. So Syncopate X equals 4 is necessary. Opponent does get another 1-1 here, but yeah, they've seen enough. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a fine hand. Plenty of life gain against the aggressive decks. And then some card draw to keep hitting our line drops, cast our sweeper. And a turn 1 Skrelv, so a white aggro deck of sorts. Just gonna pass it back. Could have gone for a Darker Waste, take 1 damage, cast Revelry. That way I could have gotten 4 life, 2 tokens, and draw a card. Would have been alright, actually. Now double initiate, so opponent on the aggressive mono-white deck. And now we can Union, and eventually set up our Sunfall, which will be quite effective. Adlin, that one can hit pretty hard, but we can try and chump it with Revelry tokens as well. So they'll get an extra token here. So now the main concern is something like an invasion of Gobakan or a Thalia, making Sunfall more expensive. But now we've got a Syncopate to potentially counter those as well. And then, even if I take 10 damage here, as long as I can untap and cast Sunfall, we should be in great shape. So I prefer keeping up Syncopate over casting Revelry and keeping up Syncopate for only X equals 1. Okay, Adversary, that can pump their whole team if they pay 2 mana. How much damage are we talking? Could of course also play Emperor, make a token to chump Adlin, even if we can't exile it with a -2. So I think this is still acceptable. That way we not only wipe the board, but we'll also have a Planeswalker in play. Opponent can use Skrelv on Adlin, naming white to prevent us from blocking. But they'll have to do it before blockers are declared. And then I can just block something else.
Anyone who harms my people must contend with me. We must.
So we'll save to activate Skrelv. They do. Okay, so in that case, just jump in initiates. Take 10, 15, down to 7, and next turn cast Sunfall, which is going to be pretty difficult for them to overcome. The pain lines, I guess, could still make a difference, but yeah, opponent has seen enough. Sunfall prompts a concession, and then Revelry could eventually gain more life as well. On to the next one. Hopefully we're not facing a poison deck, because then the life gain doesn't matter. Turn 1 Mountain and Kumano. Well, this is the matchup for Union. Still need to maybe draw into another board wipe to catch us back up. Not sure if Emperor is going to be enough by itself. Turn to Adversary, already a 3-3, so it does hit pretty hard. Hang on to Mirex, can maybe be a double white source for Emperor so we don't take damage of Darker Wastes. And we did pick up Farewell, definitely the weakest sweeper for us in the matchup, as it doesn't gain life and it's a bit more expensive than Sunfall at 5 mana. So take 6, down to 10 already. But Union is kind of like a fog effect here, it buys us a whole turn, gaining us 6 life. And a Revelry, also quite useful. So let's see, if I play a land and then play Revelry, I'll have 5 cards in hand, so I still don't get to draw So maybe that's never gonna happen in this matchup. What we could do is just play main phase Wandering Emperor, exile adversary, gain 2 life. Don't hate that idea. Just soak up some damage.
Finally, I'm home.
And then next turn we can try to draw into another land with Union. Opponent fires off Play with Fire, so yeah, the Revelry unlikely to draw us a card this game. Wandering Emperor down. And another Mirrex. So, let us Union first, and then we can still play a land, play Revelry afterwards. And then next turn, Farewell. So hope they commit more creatures to the board. Opponent has been stuck on 2 lands, so they might have some 3 and 4 mana cards in hand. And opponent knows what time it is when we block like this. It's time for a sweeper. We'll have to take 1 damage off our Darkar Wastes. So we'd like to pick up another white source at some point. Play with Fire. I don't know if they casted an upkeep. They must have casted main phase instead. Okay, so now I can pass. Could also Union main phase to hit my land drop potentially, but we'll just keep up more of our instant speed plays. And now between Mirrex and Emperor, we can start turning the corner to apply a bit of pressure. Syncopate can counter a more expensive creature, Negate can counter a more impactful burn spell. And we're still at 16, pretty deep into the game against Mono Red. They've had the chance to scry a few times with Play with Fire, so surprised to still see them on 2 lands. Although with more lands they probably just would have run more creatures into our Farewell. Stormseeker, that one's pretty good against a control deck since it's difficult to keep it daytime. So I probably want to counter it as opposed to exile it with Wandering Emperor. And then actually probably want to Union first to gain an extra life. Okay, Scorn's nice too. And another one. So we've got the next couple cards covered. Another Stormseeker, again, same reasoning. Counter as opposed to kill. And now we've got our double whites without taking damage. And we can flash an Emperor end of turn. Swiss Spear's fine. And Lightning Strike. I could negate, but I don't really mind. We're still at 20. So now Emperor, exile Swiss Spear. Keep the board nice and clear. Back up to 19. And could maybe make a token and then still put a counter on it and have Heretize Scorn available. Might be a bit unnecessary here. Could have just kept up more counterspells, but...
Strike fast and strike hard.
Swiss Spear. Okay. I think we actually counter that one, since if they have another way to enable prowess, they could take out my Emperor. And a Stormseeker, alright. They saved a good one here. Can still finish off Emperor. Nope, goes face, that's surprising. So now we just minus on the Stormseeker. And then we'll keep making more tokens with the Mirrex.
Until next time, then.
Yeah, we'll switch to nighttime, but I think we've seen pretty much all the Stormseekers. It's gonna be a long road to poison our opponent to death. Play with Fire's fine. Want to keep the negate for a more impactful non-creature spell, or maybe on a critical turn where they can maybe kill one of our poison creatures to prevent lethal. But yeah, our opponent has seen enough. This is a decent representation of the mono-red matchup. Our deck has a ton of life gain with 4 copies of Union, the 2 copies of Knockout Blow also help, and then Sunset Revelry, another great tool in the matchup, and eventually Wandering Emperor can also stabilize us by gaining more life, and eventually making an army of Samurai tokens. So we've got a ton of great cards for this type of matchup. So yeah, overall pretty happy with how this blue-white control deck is positioned in the current metagame, with a lot of main deck answers to mono-red aggro. Does mean that we can potentially suffer in other matchups, like the mono-white aggro deck with Thalia and Invasion of Gobakan. If they can disrupt us while applying pressure, that can be pretty difficult. And then a blue-black mill deck can also require us to draw a lot of our counterspells to have a chance. Otherwise, the combination of maybe some discard spells, followed by Jace, and then Breach the Multiverse to get back Jace and Milos for a bunch at once, can be a pretty difficult matchup. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.